The security desk sat in the far corner of the lobby, half hidden behind a decorative plant that no one had watered in months. From there, Ethan Brooks watched the headquarters of Harrington and Coal Industries breathe in the quiet hours of the night. The glass walls reflected city lights, polished floors echoed faintly with distant elevators, and everything felt expensive, deliberate, and completely indifferent to his presence. Ethan worked the night shift because that was what was left. At 42, he was a black man with a calm posture and a face that rarely showed what he was thinking. His uniform was dark, neatly pressed, his badge clipped perfectly straight. He took the job seriously, even though the company clearly didn't take him seriously at all. To most employees, he was just part of the building's background, like the cameras, the motion sensors, the emergency lights, necessary, replaceable, unseen. Every night at exactly 10 p.m., Ethan began his rounds. He walked past framed photos of smiling board members shaking hands, past mission statements etched into marble walls, innovation, vision, leadership, words that echoed loudly in the daytime and meant very little after midnight. Ethan noticed things. He noticed which offices stayed lit late and which executives trusted motion sensors more than people. He noticed how the server room temperature fluctuated after software updates. He noticed patterns in deliveries, gaps in cybersecurity protocols, inefficiencies that no one bothered to question because that's how it's always been done. Before this job, Ethan had been a systems analyst. Before that, a problem solver. Before that, someone who believed merit spoke louder than titles. Life had corrected him. The recession had come. The layoffs followed. Degrees stopped mattering. And when Ethan finally applied for work at Harrington and Coal, the recruiter barely glanced at his resume before pointing to the security uniform. "Night guard position," she said. Interested? He had bills, a daughter, pride he couldn't afford. So he said yes. That night, as rain streaked down the glass exterior, Ethan sat at his desk monitoring the screens. Most showed nothing but empty hallways and sleeping offices. One screen, however, caught his attention. The internal logistics dashboard left open on a forgotten terminal in the operations wing. Ethan frowned slightly. He had seen that interface before. Something about the data flow didn't make sense. Inventory delays, repeated bottlenecks, millions of dollars slowly bleeding through inefficiency, not fraud, not theft, just bad systems talking to each other badly. He leaned forward, studying the numbers. This company was leaking money every night, and no one on the board knew it. At 11:37 p.m., footsteps echoed across the lobby. 2 board members had stayed late after a strategy meeting. They walked past Ethan without slowing down. "Security's still here?" one of them muttered. "Yeah," the other replied. "At least someone's useful overnight." They laughed. Ethan didn't react. He had learned long ago that reacting gave people power they didn't deserve. Instead, he turned back to the screen, his mind already working, connections forming, solutions taking shape. By midnight, he had sketched out a fix on a notepad. Simple, elegant, efficient. The kind of idea that could save the company millions. The kind of idea no one would ever expect from the night guard. Ethan closed the notebook carefully and slid it into his bag. Tomorrow, the board would meet again. Tomorrow, they would talk about losses and strategy and unforeseen challenges. And tomorrow, if Ethan found the courage to speak in a room that had spent years pretending he didn't exist, everything could change. For the first time in a long while, the night felt less like an ending, and more like the beginning. By morning, the building transformed. What had been silent and indifferent overnight now buzzed with energy and authority. Elevators chimed constantly. Voices filled the lobby. The same executives who had walked past Ethan without noticing him the night before now strode in with confidence, coffee in hand, discussing quarterly numbers and shareholder expectations as if the walls themselves existed to applaud them. Ethan remained at his desk. Different uniform, same invisibility. He watched the board members arrive one by one, mostly white, mostly older, all dressed in variations of the same expensive certainty. They nodded to each other, exchanged handshakes, laughed easily. A few glanced in Ethan's direction, not with curiosity, but with mild surprise, as if confused that the furniture had changed position. At 8:30 a.m., the boardroom doors closed. Ethan could not hear the meeting directly, but he didn't need to. The glass walls and poor soundproofing revealed enough. Faces tightened, voices rose, slides flicked across the screen at the front of the room, charts, downward arrows, red numbers, losses. He felt it even before he saw it. Confirmed on the internal dashboard, he was authorized to monitor for security reasons only. The company was hemorrhaging money. Millions. Quietly. Consistently. The same inefficiencies he had noticed weeks ago were now too large to hide. Inside the boardroom, frustration grew. "This doesn't make sense," one man said, pacing. "We've invested heavily in automation," another replied. "Someone dropped the ball," a third snapped. Ethan stared at the numbers on his screen, his jaw tightening. No one had dropped the ball. The system itself was broken. By late morning, the meeting adjourned with no solution. Board members exited in clusters, voices sharp, tempers thin. One of them stopped near Ethan's desk, scrolling through his phone. "Make sure no one accesses the operations wing tonight," the man said without looking up. "We don't need any more surprises." Ethan nodded. "Yes, sir." The man walked away before Ethan finished speaking. That afternoon, while the building hummed with damage control and empty optimism, Ethan sat alone during his break and opened the notebook again. He reviewed his notes carefully: supply chain logic, server synchronization timing, a redesign of the nightly batch processing schedule. It wasn't flashy, it didn't require new software or massive investment, it required understanding and respect for details most people never bothered to see. Ethan knew the company culture well enough to understand the real problem wasn't the idea, it was the messenger. He had tried once before, years ago, at a different company. He had spoken up in a meeting, calmly, respectfully, only to be interrupted, talked over, and later told he was too aggressive for pointing out flaws no one else wanted to admit. The memory still burned. That evening, the building emptied again. By 9:45 p.m., the night belonged to Ethan once more. He walked the same halls, checked the same doors, monitored the same screens. But now, the numbers meant something heavier. This wasn't just inefficiency anymore. The company was weeks away from a serious crisis. At 10:58 p.m., an alert flashed on one of the monitors. Server lag. Delayed batch sync. Another automated failure. Ethan exhaled slowly. This was the moment. He could document it quietly, file it away, let the system collapse, and let executives explain it to shareholders. No one would blame the night guard. No one would ever know he had seen it coming. Or he could break protocol. At 11:12 p.m., Ethan sent a carefully worded internal message to the operations team and copied the board's executive assistant. Not emotional, not accusatory, just data, screenshots, a short explanation, and one final line. "I believe this issue can be resolved overnight without additional cost if approved." He leaned back in his chair, heart pounding harder than it ever had during any security incident. The message was sent. Now all he could do was wait, and hope that, this time, someone would read past his job title. The response did not come that night. Ethan expected that. Experience had taught him not to confuse hope with probability. Messages from people like him had a way of disappearing into inboxes without ever being opened. By the time his shift ended at dawn, nothing had changed. No reply, no acknowledgement, no sign that anyone with authority had even noticed his message. By the time he returned the next evening, however, the atmosphere in the building felt wrong. Too quiet. The usual early evening chaos, late meetings, hurried conversations, executives pretending confidence, was absent. Instead, clusters of employees stood in hallways speaking in hushed tones. Screens in offices showed frozen dashboards. The lobby TV, normally tuned to financial news, displayed a blank blue error screen. Ethan signed in for his shift as usual. The supervisor barely looked at him. "Stay alert tonight," he said. "It's scrambling. Systems are unstable." Ethan nodded, already knowing exactly why. At 9:47 p.m, his radio crackled. "Security, report to operations wing. Now." The tone was different, sharper, urgent. When Ethan arrived, he found a scene that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. Several executives stood around a conference table, jackets off, sleeves rolled up, staring at a wall of data projections. A few IT staff members typed furiously, eyes wide, faces pale. The CFO was there, so was the COO, and at the far end of the room, arms crossed tightly, stood the same board member who had called him useful overnight. The room fell silent when Ethan entered. For a moment, no one spoke. The tension was thick enough to feel. Finally, the COO cleared his throat. "You're the one who sent the message last night," he said. Ethan straightened. "Yes, sir." "Your security," the CFO said, skepticism heavy in his voice. "That's my current role," Ethan replied evenly. A few people exchanged glances. The board member scoffed quietly. "So now guards are diagnosing enterprise systems?" Ethan didn't react to the jab. He walked calmly to the screen. "If you'll allow me," he said, "I can explain what's happening." No one stopped him. He pointed to the lagging data streams. "Your logistics platform and inventory systems sync on different cycles. Every night, the delay compounds. You lose time, you lose accuracy, and you lose money. It's not theft, it's math." The IT team froze. One of them leaned closer to the screen. "That actually explains the discrepancies," Ethan continued, his voice steady. "The fix doesn't require new software. You need to realign the batch process and adjust the server handshake timing. I've outlined the steps." The room was silent again, this time not with doubt, but realization. The CFO rubbed his forehead slowly. "How long have you known this?" Ethan hesitated for half a second. "A while." "And you didn't say anything?" the board member snapped. Ethan met his eyes. "I did. Last night." No one spoke. The COO exhaled. "Can you implement the fix?" "Yes," Ethan said. "Tonight." There was a pause, then the CFO nodded once. "Do it." Ethan moved to a terminal and began typing. His fingers moved with practiced ease, confidence born not from arrogance, but from years of doing work that had never been recognized. Around him, people watched in silence as the numbers on the screen began to stabilize. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, the system refreshed. The red numbers faded. The projections leveled. The losses stopped climbing. Someone whispered, "It's working." The board member who had mocked him earlier said nothing. Ethan leaned back slightly, eyes still on the screen. He felt no triumph, no urge to say "I told you so," only a quiet certainty that this was how things should have been all along. The COO turned to him. "Why are you working security?" Ethan removed his hands from the keyboard. "Because sometimes," he said calmly, "the door you're allowed to stand by is the only one open." The room stayed silent long after the system finished updating, and for the first time, Ethan Brooks was no longer just the night guard watching the company sleep. He was the reason it would wake up at all. By the following morning, the building no longer felt indifferent. It felt cautious. Ethan arrived for his shift that evening to find his name already circulating in conversations that stopped the moment he entered a room. People looked at him differently now, not warmly, not respectfully, but with uncertainty, as if the story they had written in their heads no longer fit the facts they'd been forced to accept. The company had avoided disaster. That much was clear. By noon, the systems were stable, losses halted, and a quiet emergency meeting of senior leadership had been held behind closed doors. No press release, no public acknowledgement. Harrington and Cole preferred problems solved quietly, especially when the solution disrupted the hierarchy. Ethan returned to his desk as usual. Same chair, same monitors, same uniform. But the silence around him had changed. At 10:22 p.m., his radio crackled again. "Ethan Brooks," a voice said, formal this time, controlled. "Please report to the executive boardroom." There was a pause before someone added, "This is not a drill." Ethan stood still for a moment, hand resting on the edge of the desk. He had imagined this moment in dozens of ways, some hopeful, some bitter, some ending with security escorting him out of the building for overstepping his role. He straightened his jacket and walked. The executive boardroom looked different at night. Without daylight, the city outside the floor-to-ceiling windows felt vast and exposed. The long table gleamed under soft lights. At one end sat the full board, men and women who rarely occupied the same room unless something significant was at stake. Ethan stood near the door. No one told him to sit. The chair across from them remained empty, almost symbolic in its distance. The chairman finally spoke. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for coming." Ethan nodded. "Yes, sir." The CFO folded his hands. "We've reviewed the incident extensively." The word incident hung in the air, carefully chosen, safely vague. "You acted outside your assigned duties," the chairman continued. Ethan met his gaze. "Yes, sir." A board member leaned forward. "You accessed systems you weren't authorized to fix." "Yes." Another added, "You potentially exposed the company to risk." Ethan said nothing this time. He had learned when speaking helped, and when silence told the truth better. The COO cleared her throat. "You also saved us an estimated $43 million over the next fiscal year." The room went quiet. "That's not speculation," she added. "That's confirmed." Ethan felt his shoulders tighten, not with pride, but with restraint. He had spent his entire adult life learning how not to appear threatening when being competent. The chairman leaned back. "The board is divided." Ethan almost smiled. Almost. "Some believe this was an unacceptable breach of protocol," the chairman said. "Others believe protocol is what nearly cost us everything." The board member who had mocked him earlier shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. The chairman continued, "So we have a question for you, Mr. Brooks." Ethan waited. "Why didn't you apply for a role in operations, or IT, or strategy?" Ethan took a breath. Not a deep one, just enough. "I did," he said. Several heads turned. 3 years ago, and twice after that. My resume is still on file. Same degrees, same experience, different job title." No one interrupted him. "I was told I wasn't the right cultural fit. I was told I should be grateful for stability. I was told security was a better use of my strengths." The words landed evenly, without accusation. They didn't need emphasis. The chairman nodded slowly. "If we offered you a position, officially, would you accept?" Ethan looked around the table, at the faces, the power, the sudden interest. "Yes," he said, "if it's a real position, with authority and accountability." The COO smiled faintly. "It would be." The chairman tapped the table once. "Effective immediately, we're creating a new role, Systems Efficiency Director, reporting directly to operations. A beat. Salary and benefits commensurate with the impact you've already demonstrated." The offer sat there, heavy and undeniable. Ethan exhaled. "Thank you," he said. "I accept." As he turned to leave, the chairman added, "One more thing." Ethan stopped. "We owe you an apology." The room didn't echo with agreement, but no one disagreed. Ethan nodded once and walked out. That night, he passed the security desk one last time, not as the man assigned to stand there, but as someone who had proven that insight does not wear a uniform, and intelligence does not announce itself with a title. The building looked the same, but the rules inside it had shifted, and for the first time, Ethan Brooks wasn't guarding someone else's future. He was finally allowed to shape his own.